I was in the truck stop earlier and I got looking at some stuff I hadn't seen in a long time, and I realized that there are quite a few products that used to be real popular and widely used back in the day and are no longer used. But a lot of these new guys don't understand why they're obsolete or how they were ever used. So here's a few of them. One of the things guys used to make fun of other guys for was wearing those fingerless driving gloves. Those are the first ones. Now, trust me, there was a very real reason to have those back in the day, not so much now. Fingerless gloves, you know, truthfully, on the old school trucks with the big plastic wheels or the wooden wheels like I have, with, you know, modern suspensions and things like that, it's a lot better. But on the old trucks, those wheels would just tear your hands up. They would just beat your palms to death. And there's about 6 jokes there. But I discovered, like when I bought this, my old truck, when I put this wheel on my old truck, there was a very real reason that those were used. On a wheel like this, when you're gripping it, you know, it's not padded. So your hand is continually just being beat up on this. And when you have the hard plastic or rubber, or not rubber, but wood like this, you really don't have a very good purchase. And that's what leather does. The leather actually provides a barrier between the skin on your hand and the steering wheel. Not only does it provide some cushion, because these wheels really are hard, it also, if you get a good pair of gloves, these wheels will blister your hands if you're not careful. After a while, you do learn how to drive with them and you don't need them anymore. But when I first got this wheel, I absolutely got a pair of them because my hands just got beat up. And I had to kind of learn how to use the wheel. It's, you know, I don't wear them anymore because, well, I don't need them. But once you learn, you know, how to drive with a wooden wheel instead of a padded one, the gloves really did have a real reason. And back in the day, it was without the suspension, when they had spring ride front ends and big wheels and Armstrong steering, you absolutely needed those gloves because you would literally tear your hands up. But speaking of wheels, there's another thing. One thing a lot of guys used to put back on the day were those little you know, spinner knobs and whatnot on their steering wheel. Believe it or not, those are illegal now. They've made those illegal. You know, and the guys are like, well, they sell them in a truck stop. And I'm like, yeah, they sell radar detectors in truck stops too, but that don't mean you need to put them on your car or in your truck. But especially the long spike ones back in the day with the cab overs, and you were backing up, you had to just muscle it around, and they really did help. And I've had them on my truck. I used to set them on the bottom of the wheel on the inside because, one, it was below the window sight where the DOT couldn't see it. But when you're backing up, the little spinner actually does help quite a bit. But nobody really uses those anymore because there's no need for them. With power steering on these trucks are like driving cars now. So, you know, the little knobs and whatnot, you know, they're illegal. Nobody really enforces it, but they're another thing that's kind of gone the way of the buffalo. And it was just something, you can still buy them, but I wouldn't waste my money. I've had one on a couple of trucks, and truthfully, they're so cheap now, they just fall apart. But if you get an old school one that's got the spike that's this tall like the arm, don't get caught driving with that. They will pull you over for that. Well, mainly because guys were getting in accidents and they were getting impaled by them. I mean, when you got a spike off your steering wheel this bad and you get in a front end wreck, that spike's made of metal and it's going through something. So, yeah, just food for thought. Now, another funny thing that's kind of gotten obsolete, that you don't see anymore. In fact, I had to buy one of these. I couldn't find my old one, and this was very hard to find. And that was one of these. Now, you old-timers will know what this is a ruler, but it's made for logbooks. And it's got a whole bunch of neat stuff on it. Not only does it correlate with your hours here, and it's got inches here, of course, but it sits there and has different time slots for you to work through. It's got, you can put neat lines and all that. It actually really will feed up perfectly with this. Let me show you. Now, what this does pretty much is, like I said, it's inches here, but it's driving time here. Notice how everything lines up. And you can really get your time in here. So, if you got to write something down, and you can actually put your mark right there, and it works. Here's something neat though, and this really helps you with your recap. But this was kind of something to help make your logbook look neat so it didn't look like my mess. Yep, this is what my mess looked like, but so I had to go on paper logs a while back because e-logs are safe, efficient, and work flawlessly. Now here's a neat thing about this little spot right here in the corner. When you're sitting there doing your recap, this side is 60 hours and 7 days, and this side is 70 hours and 8 days. That's the one we wanted. So if you put it on here, like the top one, that's what I'm recapping tomorrow. That's my total hours here. So as the day goes, you always knew what you were recapping because you were continually moving down with the day. It took a lot of guesswork out, and truthfully, I used to do my recap separately from the logbook because I always figured if the DOT is going to go through that much trouble, he can figure it out himself. And a couple of times they did, and it wasn't good for anybody. To go along with the logbook and everything else, one thing that nobody really uses anymore, even though everybody has one on their phone, is a calculator. A standalone calculator back in the day was a very big deal because it really helped you on the fly. You would do a lot of math out here on the road just trying to figure out your hours, figure out your miles, figure out your time. And with a calculator, you actually could figure out your time, distance, all that, and give a real good idea of when you were going to be there, when you were going to be on track, providing everything goes well. Calculators were a very big deal back in the day just because they really helped you streamline your day, and they helped make you more efficient in time management because, well, like I said, you could sit there and do the division on the fly, as you're going down the road if, you needed to figure out at your next check call because phones really aren't as old as people think. So you sit there and stop, say, I've got 300 miles to go. Okay, I'll be there in 5 hours and 25 minutes is my estimate. So as long as you gave them an estimate and they knew where you were at or whatever, and calculators were a big deal because they helped facilitate a lot of that. Now, one of the other things that I still see them for sale, but not a lot of people buy them anymore, and that's briefcases. In the digital age, our paperwork gets scanned rather quickly, or everything gets automatically uploaded to the company or to your accountant or whatever. I mean, you can do everything through email on your phone. But back in the day, a briefcase was actually really important because it helped keep you organized. And if you had to, gather all your paperwork up quick, all you had to do was close it, lock it, and you were gone. So you kept your billing and your log sheets and all that other stuff, your calculator, your extra pens, your office supplies, everything stayed in that briefcase. The briefcase was a lot more important than you realize. So especially with guys that were jumping in and out of trucks, they could sit there, slam their briefcase closed, and then they could take it all into the office, or they could take it home, or they, do whatever they needed to do. not a lot of people have briefcases anymore. I've had a couple of them back in the day. But, you know, a briefcase really did make a lot of sense because, well, especially you didn't want your bills getting lost because that's how you got paid. You had to turn them in, you know, your load sheets, whatever other paperwork you had. It was a great way to stay organized, keep everything in one spot, because back in the day, everything was on paper. So you'd call in and you'd, you know, tell them what you have, and then you'd either have to mail your bills in or drop them off as you went by. Chances are you get paid regardless, but, you know, they'd have to have the paperwork for the proper billing. And so if you could get them dropped in the mail or you could drop them by, that was one thing. You know, fax machines were around, but they were used, but they were so expensive that a lot of people only used them when they absolutely had to. Usually, especially before deregulation, you were going by a terminal. You know, you would be getting your freight out and you'd be deadheading back for the most part. And you'd be going back to your terminal or whatnot, and it was easy to drop the bills off. And with the invention of general freight, that's become a little more tough, but you can still drop your bills in the mailbox. And you know, back in the day, there was a lot more places to drop your mail, and you know, the truck stops all had mail. You could buy stamps, you could buy envelopes. You know, mailing things was a lot easier then than it is now. But that was the importance of a briefcase. You don't see that too much anymore. One of the things that actually, it's kind of funny, I haven't seen one in years, well, except for the one I have, was with meat haulers. They used to carry these. These were meat hooks, and they were for swinging beef, and they'd hang up, and the meat would hang on here on a rack over the hook. But these doubled as fifth wheel pullers. And back when swinging meat was a lot more of a thing, it kind of went out of style in, I'm going to say, around 2010. I just don't see the swinging trucks like I used to, and it's still a thing, but not like it used to be. But these were to be prized because they, you know, not only do they, you know, serve a function to hang meat from, but they also, you can use them for fifth wheel pullers. That's what I used to use that one for. It was a fifth wheel puller. I could sit there and use it for a tire thumper. You could use it for a pry bar. I mean, they were so durable. You could use them for just about anything, you know, that needed a hook. In fact, you know, even if you had an old load bar, you can actually hang stuff from the load bar with the meat hook. There used to be a place in Emporia back when IBP used to have a kill floor there. A guy out there used to have racks of them, and he'd sell them to you here and there. And basically what I wanted them for was fifth wheel pullers, and I'd get them for friends and all that because they really were something that was needed and used. And they still, you know, I still use them today, but you just don't see them like you used to. In fact, I bet there's a lot of guys out here that are watching these that have probably never seen one because swinging beef really isn't as prevalent as it used to be. Most of this stuff just gets boxed up and shipped now, but hey, they had their purpose, and now I've repurposed it for my purpose. So I've had that one since since 02, I think, 03. Yeah, I've had that one at least 20 years. So back in the late 90s, early 2000s, inverters really weren't a thing. So everything had to go into a cigarette lighter. And the one thing that revolutionized the trucking industry, and this is not a joke, that made things a lot better for us, was the invention of the Coleman cooler. Now, you don't see plug-in coolers as much as you used to. In fact, I haven't seen one for sale in a long time. I still have one, in fact. And they were an induction cooler. To basically, they just took the air from outside, chilled it, and it was just like an air pump. It was a really weird deal, but it would keep things cold. Now, you had to put them in there cold, but it would take that cold air and recirculate it and just it was really neat. But when the plug-in cooler came out, it was revolutionary for truck drivers, because you could plug it in and you could have keep your food cold. Now, microwaves in trucks really weren't a thing either, because, well, inverters. But, you know, shore power really wasn't a thing either at the time. So you have like cold sandwiches and snacks to keep your soda cold and things of that nature. And you take a lot of your stuff into the truck stop and microwave it, as long as it wasn't Indian food. And I wish those guys would quit that, because they make the truck stop stink. But, yeah. But I digress. The Coleman plug-in cooler was a real game changer. And it opened up the door for a lot of other 12-volt things. Now, I'm not saying inverters didn't exist, but there's a lot of things back then that would have been handy for the truck that either weren't efficient, were just prohibitively expensive, like inverters, or were just notorious for catching on fire, like inverters. So a lot of guys didn't do that. So, you know, you could get plug-in coffee makers, plug-in skillets, the lunchbox cooker. Now, that's really not an obsolete thing, but the lunchbox cooker was a big thing, because basically guys would sit there, build their dinner, put it in there, and it was just basically almost a ghetto-style crock pot. You just put it in there, plug it in, put it in the back, make sure it doesn't tip over, and the thing would cook your dinner, and 5, 6, 7 hours later, it's done. Now, I knew guys that actually figured out they cook eggs in it, cook bacon in it. They did all their cooking in those little lunchbox cookers. And if any of you old school guys still have them, you can still buy them. But they were a lot neater than people realize. And to this day, I don't think the lunchbox cooker ever got the credit it deserved. The thing is, in this day and age, you know, we got shore power, we have inverters, we have APUs. You know, we have refrigerators in the trucks, we have microwaves in the trucks. I have a fridge, I don't have a microwave. I keep saying I'm going to get one, but I never do. I never do a lot of things. Yeah. But, you know, a lot of the things that we take for granted, you know, weren't even options 20 years ago. And these were a few of the things that were just crossing my mind lately. And what started it off, seeing this, was a pair of those old the sunglasses that cut out glare. Back in the 70s, they were called T-shades, and they were a fashion icon. But those yellow glasses did actually serve a purpose. They cut glare. I've tried them out, they do, but they give me a headache, especially at night. So I don't wear them. In fact, I don't wear sunglasses at all unless it's snowing, unless there's snow on the ground, because with the sun out, that gets just too bright. But, you know, a lot of these things we laugh at in truck stops really did serve a real function back in the day. And there was a real need and want for them, because they did serve a legit purpose. A lot of these things we make fun of now. But 20, 25 years ago, man, you would have been hot stuff if you had one. Like the cooler. I remember when I got my first cooler, man, like I said, that was a game changer, because I could finally carry lunch meat and cheese and pickles. I could make my own sandwiches on the road. You know, I could, you know, boil up eggs at the house and put them in there. A lot of these things really were game changers. And a lot of these things we take for granted now, you know, we didn't have them 20 years ago. Back 20 years ago, you just had an empty hole back here with a bed and shelving for your clothes. You know, TVs were 12-volt plug-ins. My first TV was a 5-inch black and white that I sat on the dash, and I had the little dial that you did in the front to try to tune something in. You know, things have come a long ways. And like I said, these were just a few things that I was thinking about when I saw those T-shades in the truck stop. You know, what else is obsolete now? Doesn't mean that they don't still have a purpose, but with time marching on, people are using them less and less. because they either don't need them anymore or something better has replaced them. So, anyhow, that's just something that was crossing my mind. I hope this brought back some memories for some people, or some of these other guys are probably like, the hell is he talking about? Either way, I had fun making the video, and I had fun kind of researching it. I wish I could have got some actual live pictures and stuff like that. And I got some plans in the future to hopefully step it up a little bit and do things a little better, but out here on the road it does make it kind of difficult. So that's why most of the ones on the road are just me talking. So I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. You guys have fun out there, and we'll see you next video.